They told you that a great perfume captures a memory, the scent of a rose from a lost garden, the ozone of a summer storm, an echo of a moment, bottled in alcohol and oil. The truth is far more intimate. The most exclusive perfume in the world did not recreate a memory. It was one, and it belonged to someone else. Before we uncork this bottle, understand its contents. This channel is a distillery. We separate the beautiful, intoxicating myths from the raw and often poisonous truths of history. If you prefer the scent of the lie, leave this place. But if you have the courage to inhale the true, unfiltered essence of human ambition, then subscribe. Prove you have the senses to perceive the truth. The House of L'Étranger was not in the business of chemistry. They were in the business of psychic plunder. The creation of the world's most sublime sensory experiences, achieved through the systematic distillation of human memory, leaving the source a hollowed-out amnesiac, a willing ghost. Our story begins in Paris, 1895, the Belle Époque, a city of breathtaking beauty and exquisite cruelty, a glittering world of electric lights, grand art, and decadent parties, all built upon a dark, sprawling foundation of abject poverty. And in this world, the ultimate luxury was not a jewel or a gown. It was a custom-blended perfume from the House of L'Étranger. Their promise was not that their scent would help you recall a memory. Their promise was that it would give you one. For a price, a bored countess could experience the genuine, heartbreaking thrill of a young soldier's first love. A jaded industrialist could feel the pure, unadulterated joy of a child's first snowfall. They were selling stolen moments, and in the dark, desperate corners of Paris, business was booming. Alchemist at the heart of this trade was a woman known only as Madame L'Étranger, the stranger. She was a ghost in her own salon, a figure of myth and whispers. She was never seen in public. Her clients, the wealthiest and most powerful people in Europe, would be ushered into a dimly lit, velvet-lined room where they would speak their desires to a silk screen. From behind it, a voice would emerge, a voice like cool, dry smoke that seemed to understand the deepest, most secret hungers of their souls. The true work, the distillation, was performed 2 floors below, in a laboratory that was half perfumer's organ, half surgical theater. Here, Madame L'Étranger was not a ghost. She was a scientist of terrifying precision. A tall, ageless woman with eyes the color of faded silver and hands that moved with the steady grace of a master craftsman. Her face was a serene, unreadable mask, framed by coiled silver hair. Her process was a secret she guarded more closely than any king his treasury. She had discovered that intense, peak human experiences, moments of profound joy, terror, grief, or first love, create a unique biochemical signature in the body, a psychosomatic residue that lingers in the blood, the skin, the very breath of the person experiencing it. She had spent decades creating a machine, a monstrous alembic of spun glass and silver wiring, which she called l'alembic de l'âme, the soul still. This machine could gently, and over many hours, extract this residue from a human subject, and then distill it into a single, perfect, impossibly potent drop of essential oil. But the machine needed a source. It needed raw material, and for this, Madame L'Étranger had a silent partner, a man named Jean-Luc, the city's most ruthless and efficient procurer. He ran a network of orphanages, debtors' prisons, and desperate asylums. He was a connoisseur of human experience. He would find a young seamstress experiencing the first dizzying blush of love. He would find a soldier, returned from the colonies, haunted by a single, terrifying memory of a jungle ambush. He would find a mother grieving the loss of her child. He would not come to them with threats. He came with an offer, a kindness. He would offer the seamstress a sum of money that would allow her and her lover to escape their poverty. He would offer the soldier a place of peace and a promise to lift the burden of his memory. He offered the grieving mother a gentle, permanent end to her sorrow. The price was simple, a single, painless session at a private clinic. They would fall asleep in a quiet, comfortable room and wake up feeling lighter, empty. The memory, the feeling that had defined them, would be gone. A fair trade, he would explain, for peace of mind or a new life. And the desperate, the heartbroken, and the hopeful always agreed. These donors would be brought to Madame L'Étranger's laboratory. They would be placed in a comfortable chair, connected to the soul still by a series of fine, almost invisible tubes. They would be given a gentle sedative, and then Madame L'Étranger would begin her work. She would sit opposite them, her silver eyes fixed on theirs, her soft, smoky voice guidey. "Engie them back to the peak moment. Tell me of the boy," she would whisper to the seamstress. "The feeling of his hand in yours, the scent of the rain on his coat." As the girl relived the memory, her body would reproduce the chemical signature, and the soul still would hum to life, gently, imperceptibly, drawing it out of her. When she awoke, the money would be in her hand, but the memory of the boy, the feeling of love, would be a faint, hollow echo. The first person to suspect the true nature of this trade was not a policeman, but a client. The Duchess of Albret was one of L'Étranger's most valued customers. A woman of immense wealth and profound boredom, she lived for the vicarious thrill of the stolen moments. One week, she purchased a scent called Première Neige, first snow. When she applied it, she was overwhelmed by a perfect, crystalline memory, the feeling of a small, mitten-clad hand in her father's, the crisp, cold air, the breathtaking joy of seeing the world transformed. It was the most pure, beautiful thing she had ever felt. A few days later, attending a charity event at one of Jean-Luc's orphanages, she saw a young girl, no older than 7, sitting alone in a corner, staring at the floor with eyes that were utterly, hauntingly vacant. The Duchess, moved by a rare flicker of pity, knelt beside her. "What is your name, little one?" she asked. The girl did not respond. "Do you like the snow?" The Duchess tried again, trying to make a connection. The girl looked up at her, her face a mask of profound confusion. "What?" she whispered, her voice a tiny, empty sound, "is snow?" The Duchess felt a cold dread that no perfume could mask. She was wearing a memory that had been stolen from the hollow eyes of the child sitting in front of her. The Duchess of Albret was a woman who had spent her life cultivating a protective shell of cynical detachment, but the sight of that hollow-eyed child cracked it wide open. For the first time, she understood the true, monstrous nature of her luxury. The beautiful memories she purchased were not created, they were harvested. She was a connoisseur of stolen souls. Consumed by a mixture of horror and a strange, unfamiliar guilt, she began her own quiet, dangerous investigation. She used her immense wealth and social connections to look into Jean-Luc's network. She discovered a disturbing pattern. His orphanages had an unusually high turnover rate of children who were listed as being transferred to country patrons. His asylums had a remarkable cure rate for patients suffering from intense, singular traumas, patients who were then discharged with a peculiar, placid amnesia. The Duchess needed an ally, someone from the world of science who could understand the impossible process she suspected was at play. She found him in Dr. Lucien Bernard, a brilliant but disgraced neurologist. Bernard had been on the verge of a breakthrough in mapping the chemical basis of memory, but his radical theories and his insistence that memory could be physically transferred had seen him ostracized by the conservative medical establishment. The Duchess approached him, presenting him with a vial of L'Étranger's Première Neige. "Doctor," she said, her voice stripped of its usual aristocratic languor, "I believe this perfume is not a chemical compound. I believe it is a memory, a real one, and I believe it was taken from a child." Bernard at first was skeptical, but upon analyzing the substance, he was stunned. Using his own advanced spectrographic techniques, he found that the oil contained complex neuropeptides and protein chains that had no business being in a perfume. They were the very biochemical markers of long-term memory formation he had theorized about for years. It was the physical ghost of a thought. The scent was not a recreation of a memory. It was its preserved, distilled essence. "My God," he whispered, staring at the readings. "This is not perfumery. This is psychic taxidermy. To distill a memory with this purity, the process must be absolute. It would not just copy the memory. It would have to consume it entirely from the source." The Duchess and the doctor formed a secret, unlikely alliance. She provided the funding and the access. He provided the scientific framework for the horror. Their goal was to find a donor, someone who had undergone the process and could provide a living testament to the crime. They found him in a veterans' hospital on the outskirts of Paris. His name was Antoine, a former legionnaire who had been discharged from Jean-Luc's asylum after being cured of the shell shock and recurring nightmares of a brutal colonial battle. He was calm, placid, and worked as an orderly. He had no memory of his service, no recollection of the battle that had shattered his mind. The Duchess approached him, wearing a new scent she had just purchased from L'Étranger. It was called Jungle Fever. As she passed by him, Antoine froze. He dropped the tray he was see. Hurrying, his placid face contorted, he began to sweat, to tremble. He clutched his head, a low moan escaping his lips. "The rain," he gasped, his eyes wide with a terror he didn't understand. The smell of the rot, the shouting. The scent was his own stolen trauma, a memory so powerful that even a ghost of it was enough to trigger a violent, physical reaction. He was a living echo chamber, responding to a part of his own soul that had been bottled and sold as a luxury good. Bernard now had his proof. The process was real, and it left a psychic scar on its victims, a phantom limb of the soul that would ache for a lifetime. The plan the Duchess and the doctor devised was a trap, not for a criminal but for an artist. They knew they could not expose Madame Elétranger through the police. Her clients were too powerful. They had to use her own obsession, her own artistic pride, against her. The Duchess sent a message through the silk screen, requesting a new, unique commission. It was to be the masterpiece of Elétranger's career. She did not want to buy a memory of joy or sorrow. She wanted to buy the memory of a genius at the moment of his greatest creation. She described a fictional composer, a man of legendary talent, and the moment he first heard the perfect, complete symphony in his mind. She called the desired scent Silent Symphony. The request was an irresistible challenge to Madame Elétranger, to capture not just an emotion, but the abstract, intellectual ecstasy of pure artistic creation. It would be her crowning achievement. But she had no such donor. A genius of that caliber was not to be found in Jean-Luc's stable of the desperate and the broken. For the first time, she would have to procure the source herself. The Duchess, through a series of carefully planted rumors and anonymous tips orchestrated by Dr. Bernard, created the perfect bait. She invented a reclusive, unknown musical prodigy named Adrien, a young man said to be composing a work of revolutionary genius in a small, secluded apartment in Montmartre. She made him a ghost, a myth, a man whose music was so profound he refused to share it with the world. Madame Elétranger, her artistic ambition overriding her usual caution, took the bait. For weeks her agents searched for the mysterious Adrien. When they could not find him, she, the woman who never left her salon, decided to seek him out herself. Following the trail of whispers, she arrived one evening at the address the Duchess had provided. The apartment was real, and inside a young man was playing the piano. The music was breathtaking, a torrent of complex, beautiful, and utterly original sound. Madame Elétranger stood outside the door, mesmerized. She was listening to the sound of pure, unadulterated genius. She had found her source. The young man was not a composer. He was a gifted conservatory student, hired by Dr. Bernard for the performance of his life. The music he was playing was not his own. It was being fed to him, note by note, through a new invention, a discreet, wireless earpiece connected to a phonograph in the adjacent apartment, where Bernard was playing a recording of a new, experimental symphony. This is the turning point, the moment the hunter becomes the hunted, caught in a web of her own obsessions, when the beautiful, intricate methods of the villain are turned against them. If you appreciate the chilling elegance of this trap, the intellectual poetry of the reversal, then make your presence known. This is a story for those who understand that the greatest pride is always the greatest vulnerability. Hit the like button. Subscribe. The final distillation is about to begin. Madame Elétranger approached the young pianist, not as a scientist, but as a patron, a fellow artist. She spoke to him of his genius, of his silent symphony. She offered him a fortune, fame, everything an artist could desire. The price, she explained, was a simple one: to share with her the essence of his inspiration, to allow her to capture the scent of his muse, so that the whole world could experience a fraction of his genius. The student, coached by Bernard, played his part perfectly. He was hesitant, reclusive, protective of his gift. It took a week of careful seduction before he agreed. He would come to her clinic for one session. The night of the appointment, Madame Elétranger was in a state of artistic fervor. She led the prodigy to her laboratory, to the soul still. This time there was no Jean-Luc, no guards. It was just her, her art, and the perfect source. She connected him to the machine. She administered the gentle sedative. She sat opposite him, her silver eyes glowing with anticipation, and whispered the trigger. "Let me hear the symphony, Adrien, let me feel it." As the student feigned a creative trance, Dr. Bernard initiated the final phase of the plan. He was not in the adjacent apartment. He was in the building's sub-basement, standing before the main gas lines that fed the entire building. The beautiful, glowing lamps in Madame Elétranger's laboratory were not electric, they were gas. And the soul still itself, with its intricate network of heated glass and silver wiring, generated a significant and very delicate static electrical field. It was a beautiful, perfect, and highly volatile bomb. As Madame Elétranger leaned closer to the composer, her senses focused entirely on capturing the sublime essence of his feigned inspiration, Dr. Bernard turned a single, heavy valve in the basement. The flow of gas to her laboratory did not stop. It surged, doubling, then tripling the pressure. Upstairs, the gas lamps did not just burn brighter, they began to hiss, the flames elongating into pale, hungry blue tongues. A faint, sweet, cloying smell began to fill the pristine laboratory. Madame Elétranger, lost in her artistic pursuit, noticed it only as a slight, unexpected top note in the room's atmosphere. The soul still hummed, its silver wires glowing as it worked to distill a memory that wasn't there. The student, now breathing in the enriched gas, began to feel genuinely dizzy, his feigned trance becoming real. He slumped forward in the chair. Madame L'Étranger saw this not as a sign of danger, but as the moment of ultimate surrender, the final, perfect release of the creative soul. She leaned in, inhaling deeply, wanting to catch the very first molecule of the silent symphony. At that moment, the delicate static field generated by the soul still reached a critical point in the gas-saturated air. A single, tiny blue spark, no bigger than a pinprick, leaped from a silver wire to a brass fitting. The explosion was not a loud, vulgar detonation. It was a silent, incandescent whoosh, a wave of pure white heat that vaporized everything in the room in an instant. The laboratory, the soul still, the student, and Madame L'Étranger herself were all consumed, distilled into a single, final, fiery essence. The artist was annihilated by her own process. The Duchess of Albret and Dr. Bernard watched the flash from a safe distance. They had not exposed a crime, they had erased it. There was no body, no evidence, no machine left to study. The House of L'Étranger and its impossible science had simply vanished in a puff of unexplained, fragrant smoke. The official story, carefully shaped by the Duchess's influence, was a tragic accident, a gas leak, a terrible misfortune that had claimed the lives of a reclusive perfumer and a promising young musician. The city mourned the loss of its greatest artisan. Her powerful clients, their source of vicarious life suddenly gone, felt a quiet, terrible relief. Their secret was safe. The donors, the hollowed-out ghosts left in the wake of L'Étranger's art, were never cured. The parts of their souls that had been stolen were gone forever. Antin, the soldier, would forever flinch at the smell of rain on hot pavement. The little orphan girl would never know the joy of a winter's day. They were the living archives of a secret art form, their phantom limbs aching with memories that now existed only as a lingering scent in the boudoirs of the rich. Dr. Bernard, profoundly shaken by the violence of his solution, burned all his research. He had proven his theories, but he had also seen the monstrous use to which they could be put. He retired from science, spending the rest of his life in quiet obscurity, haunted by the knowledge that the human soul could be bottled, and that he was the one who had smashed the still. The legend of the House of L'Étranger faded into a perfumed myth, a story whispered among the elite of a golden age of lost artistry. The disappearance of its founder was seen as a tragedy, the end of an era of sublime, unattainable luxury. The truth of her methods was buried under a consensus of silence, a conspiracy between the powerful who had been her clients and the respectable who could not fathom her science. But the science itself did not die in the fire. Madame L'Étranger was a genius, but she was also a meticulous artisan who kept off-site records. In a vault, deep in a Swiss bank, lay her formulary, a series of leather-bound books containing not just the chemical compositions of her bases, but the detailed methodology of the soul still. The principles of psychosomatic distillation, the frequencies required to extract specific emotional resonances, the precise chemical signatures of joy, grief, and terror, it was all there, a complete instruction manual for the art of psychic plunder. Her silent partner, Jean-Luc, the procurer, survived the explosion. He lost his most valuable client, but he still possessed his network and his unique understanding of the human heart's desperate economy. He knew the formulary existed, and he knew that in a world of ever-increasing boredom and alienation, the demand for authentic, powerful human experience would only grow. He quietly sold his knowledge of the vault's location to a new, more powerful client, a shadowy international consortium that was not interested in perfume. They were interested in control. They understood that L'Étranger's genius was not in what she created, but in what she removed. The ability to surgically extract a powerful, defining memory from a person was a weapon of unimaginable potential. You could remove a soldier's trauma, creating a more efficient killer. You could remove a politician's guilt, creating a more ruthless leader. You could remove a populace's memory of freedom, creating a more compliant workforce. The soul still was not a tool for luxury. It was a tool for social engineering. The science went underground, refined and industrialized. The beautiful, bespoke art of Madame L'Étranger became the cold, efficient science of memory editing. Her legacy was not a line of beautiful perfumes, but a quiet, ongoing program of psychic pacification, a world where the most inconvenient memories, the most disruptive passions, could be quietly, cleanly, and voluntarily distilled away. The ghosts she created were simply the prototypes for a new, quieter, and more peaceful kind of human being. The House of L'Étranger reveals the ultimate commodity in a world saturated with artifice, authentic human experience. Madame L'Étranger was not just a perfumer, she was the ultimate broker of the soul, proving that the most profound moments of a life can be extracted, bottled, and sold to the highest bidder. Her work is a testament to a terrifying and eternal principle, that the boredom of the rich will always be paid for by the vivisection of the poor. Her clients were not seeking a scent, they were seeking a substitute for their own empty lives. They were vampires of a new, more refined sort, feeding not on blood, but on the genuine, messy, and powerful emotions of others. They prove that the most profound human desire is not for happiness, but for feeling itself, and that some are willing to commit any atrocity by proxy to feel something real, even for a moment. Do not think this alchemy is a thing of the past. The soul still was merely a crude, artisanal prototype. The process has been industrialized, democratized, and made digital. Every time you watch a viral video of someone else's genuine joy, profound grief, or authentic rage, you are dabbing a scent from the House of L'Étranger behind your ears. You are a consumer of distilled emotion. The internet is the new perfumer's organ, a vast, endlessly scrolling catalog of vicarious experience, designed to give you a momentary hit of a feeling you are not generating yourself. The donors are no longer sourced from orphanages and asylums. They are the content creators, the influencers, the everyday people who willingly offer up their most intense private moments, their loves, their losses, their transformations, to be distilled into a few seconds of consumable media. They are paid not in gold, but in likes and shares, trading the lived experience for its hollow, digital reflection. And we, the audience, inhale it, feel a faint echo of it, and are left, like the Duchess, feeling emptier than before. It is time to make a choice. Will you be a consumer of stolen moments, or will you be the creator of your own? In the comments below, it is time to put the stopper back in the bottle, to make a declaration of sensory sovereignty. State it twice. I live my owns. I live my owns. This is not a comment. It is a vow to feel your own life, not just to watch the lives of others. If you are ready to continue this work, to unplug from the great soul still and rediscover the scent of your own reality, subscribe. Activate the notification bell, for the distillery is open 24 hours a day. Share this with one other person who you feel is forgetting what it is like to truly live. They have created a world where you can feel anything except your own life. We are here to remind you of the profound, irreplaceable, and radical power of your own unbottled experience.